Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, if you tune in to our podcast, to Risual Radio this afternoon. My name's Mark Wilson, and I'm joined here with one colleague and one special guest to talk a little bit this afternoon around modern workplace. I guess at this point, I'll introduce our other speakers this afternoon. Would you like to go first, Abby?
Yeah, so I'm Abby, and I lead the business analyst team in Risual. So one of our key things really is to make sure that anything that's done from a technical point of view fits the user needs, and we can obviously get those benefits out of the users as well.
Great, thanks. And Alfonso, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for the invitation to all the Risual team. So Alfonso Ciappa, I am partner development manager in Microsoft. I look after all Surface partners. Basically, what we do is really try to help partners to understand Microsoft technologies and really drive together success for our customers. So it's really how they can use Microsoft technologies to solve customer solution. Specifically, my area of expertise is Surface devices. I hope everyone knows about Microsoft Surface. If not, hopefully during this conversation, they will get to know more about them.
Yeah. Sounds good. I probably should have mentioned what I do as well. So I run jointly run the architect team at Risual. So I tend to get involved in the early stages of solutions, working with clients to try and understand what their business challenges are and how we can use technology to address them. And then I'm generally less involved in delivery, but yeah, have a bit of a helicopter view over quite a lot of things. So anyway, enough of the introductions there. I guess let's move on to the conversation. And I think maybe the first area might be to have a look at what we need from productivity tools in well, I would say in 2020. It's been a bit of a year. Lots of things have changed. I think it's probably helped some clients to maybe accelerate some of their plans. Others have had a bit of catch up. And we had another podcast where we looked at how businesses are reacting to the challenges that we're in the current environment with the I want to avoid the phrase the new normal. I think I'm going to ban that for this discussion. But what sort of things do we think people need to consider as they start to recover and rebuild from COVID-19?
Yeah, I'll kick this one off then. Mm-hmm. So I think from my point of view, and what we're seeing a lot now is making sure that people are enabled and making sure that they've got everything they could possibly need to work from literally anywhere. It's the whole business continuity side as well, and making sure that if anything else happens, where you can't get into a building, snow days, all those sort of things, it's a real change now to start to think, okay, looking to the future around device refreshes and how people work, we can really start to be a bit more intelligent with the devices that are provided to users, rather than just one size fits all, or still being on desktops. I mean, I've seen some things where people are still on desktops and had to take them from an office to home and those sort of things. Yeah. So it's about making sure that the person is able to work in an agile way with a complementary device. And also, when we look at a blended sort of office, where some people might be in the office, some people might be remote. Obviously, as we move forwards, there will be, hopefully, that way of working for most organisations. Then you've got to obviously think about enabling that in the office as well as at home. So making sure that the devices in meeting rooms and all those sort of things really fit the future of the technologies and the devices.
I guess that's a really important thing, isn't it? Because for a long time, anybody who was working remotely was almost a second-class citizen. They got forgotten that they were in the meeting when there's a whole load of people in a conference room. And I mean, how can we address those sorts of challenges? And Alfonso, there's things like the hub. Do they help with things like that?
Yeah, I think if we look at from our side, from the devices point of view, of course, we have the range of devices like a more personal use, right? That we have the Go, Surface Pro, Surface Laptop that actually each of us can take at home, then go back to work and use it as a kind of your full day device. And then devices like Surface Hub that actually are more for collaboration. And if we think pre-COVID, we were thinking really about people in a meeting room collaborating. Actually, now we can expand that and say, now it really makes sense for people that is in the room, but also for everyone that is outside. And then having good audio, having a good camera, having a device that everyone can jump in and be in the same session, etc., really makes sense. Because I think people believe that suddenly we will go back to the office, everyone in the office. And as you just mentioned, it's going to be really about people really working from home now, much more common. And then suddenly they decide one day I'm going to the office, one day I'll stay at home. So very, very flexible. And I really see that that's going to be the future for how we will be working. So having a Surface Hub that allowed you to collaborate with people in the office, but also outside, I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, it's been a bugbear, I think, of a lot of people previously about the varying sort of technology in each of the different meeting rooms. So you could have 10 meeting rooms and there's 5 different setups across those meeting rooms. There's cables missing for some reason. People like to steal HDMI cables. I'm not quite sure why, but I think it's starting to build out those more intelligent workspaces, and using, it might cost a little bit more, but that whole sort of return on investment is the person and the productivity. You often waste 10-15 minutes in a meeting room trying to get the screen to work. You just like to be able to walk to a meeting room and crack on, and then walk to a different meeting room and be able to have the same experience.
Yeah, and that's really important when you consider the cost of people. It might only be 5 or 10 minutes at the start of a meeting, but every meeting with lots of people, that really starts to add up. And that's one of the great things when the Risual offices were open, and hopefully they will be again one day in some form. We have 3 rooms with Surface Hubs. We've got other rooms where the projectors are hooked up to a Microsoft virtual adapter that allows us to just cast from our devices straight to it. And we're only a Windows K away from projecting, and it's really simple and straightforward, isn't it?
I like that little slogan. You should tweet one.
I've forgotten it already. I'll have to listen to the recording.
We're only a Windows K away.
Yeah, and I think the key is, if we think about the other side of the technology, the cloud, we are talking about the integration of different technologies and how it works together. And actually, we can talk about the same in this kind of from the hardware point of view. It's how we will make sure that your personal device is integrated with your meeting room system, if you have a Surface Hub as well. So it's really about making sure that you keep in the flow. That's something that we use a lot. Is really how you get there, ready to go. You open your device, boom. So very efficient way of working. And to do it, that maybe it's going to be a little bit more expensive. There is ways to not make it that expensive as well with different solutions, but it's really about productivity, and I would say a different productivity, because now it's a mix between virtual, in person, and how you really make that productive for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I've been fortunate enough to work with a Surface device for 5 years now. Surface Pro, it's my tool every day. I find working with the convertible form factor is really helpful to me. So it can be a laptop when I want, it can be a tablet when I want. I can draw on the screen with a pen. That's great. But that's just one of many Surface devices, isn't it? I just wonder if, without turning this into a Surface ad, but I mean, we did put a graphic up with the tweet when I was talking about recording this podcast today, that sort of shows the range, and it might be useful for people to understand just some highlights of what's in the Surface range. Are you able to take us through that, Alfonso?
Yeah, definitely. So I think Microsoft Surface has been around almost 7 years already, 7 to 8 years. In a hardware business, I would say not that extensive, but yeah, we have been a long way. And if you think about our Surface family now, thank you, Mark, for showing it. We have the idea of why we're building these devices to be able to serve every person in the organization. So we are going from the smallest and thin device like the Surface Go for those mobile workers that need to be out, but they don't need that powerful device, so very light but useful to do your day-to-day work. So that's Surface Go, and you have the 2-in-1 factor as well. Then we move and we have the Surface Pro, also they give you that flexibility of the 2-in-1, go out, mobile workers, but they need a little bit more powerful device. Now we launched last October Pro X. That is kind of the new generation of Surface Pro, full LTE, and it's really looking at how you can really embrace more mobility with connection, LTE connection, and the cloud, because the Pro X is really thinking about the future with Windows Virtual Desktop, how you will be connected from everywhere to internet and then have access to a more powerful device with Virtual Desktop. Then we have laptop. That is, of course, everyone knows what is a laptop, but we still have some people that they prefer a laptop. Actually, I'm using my laptop 3 now. And even though I like the Pro, because I would say I'm more in the office than out, for me, it's more comfortable to use using a laptop device. So actually, that's another element that we're including in that Surface laptop. Then we have Surface Book, similar with laptop, but very powerful. So maybe for engineers, designers that they need a powerful device to go around as well, Surface Book. And finally, Surface Studio, that is the desktop device, but in a really nice factor and as a premium device. Finally, of course, the Surface Hub we already covered for collaboration. But if you think the range is really about every persona in the organization, try to give the best tool for each persona. That's the main concept at the end.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I guess, you know, it's not just about the devices themselves, it's about the things that you put with them as well, isn't it? And that all sort of adds to the persona. So for those who can see the video, this will go up on YouTube, and some people will be able to see video. Those who are listening audio, you'll have to put up with our descriptions, I'm afraid. But you know, there's things like mice, there's the type covers, there's headphones, earbuds, pens, docks. You know, it's a whole ecosystem of products, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about the type covers, the pen with different colors, that sometimes, yeah, we used to have like black or platinum. But if you think about how we are using the technology today, our devices, that we use it at home, we use it in the office, we use it in the train. Actually, there is a lot of customization, like consumer point of view as well for devices and what you're using. If you're using a device, you want to feel proud, or I know it's cool to use a red device maybe for you. And that's also something that we are giving that to commercial business to give to their employees at the end, is that they can choose a device that maybe fit with their personality, how they want to show up, not only on the office, but when they are working in a cafeteria, for example. So it's really about that as well, what you can see in the type cover, in the pen, giving that color. Can sound like a small detail, but actually it makes a difference for people.
No. It's like people, when there's a device that people use every day, it's really personal. I mean, my Surface Pro 3, which has been retired for many years, it had an unfortunate accident with a hard floor, but it was covered in stickers. You know, that was my personalization approach. You know, I was sad to see that go, and yeah, it's like, you know, people get attached to all sorts of things that they work with every day, don't they? So, Abby, that persona thing, so sort of moving away from the Surface range itself, but when you're working with clients around user personas, you know, how much does the device play in, and how much is, you know, what other needs do we find that people have that?
Yeah, so I think overall in sort of a modern workplace world, it's obviously having the device, the tools and the processes in place to enable people to be the best they can be in their role. So from a persona point of view, it is, the devices do play a massive part in it, because you start to understand what they do day to day. If they're traveling a lot and they've got a really clunky heavy laptop, now that's really disheartening when you're having to travel around with a heavy laptop bag. Yeah. And it's just about giving that support of them to do their role without always hitting these blockers or the pain points, like lifting a heavy laptop and lugging that around. That's an actual physical pain point, which is not ideal. And you've got things like where they've got a laptop, but they might actually need a tablet because they're face to face with people. They're doing consultations, they are doing home visits, and a laptop's quite intrusive. because it's just a barrier between you and the other person. So I think when we look at personas and start to build out those personas around the way people work, it becomes very clear around what devices fit their needs, along with the technologies and the tools that they might use. Obviously, Microsoft 365 and services obviously going hand in hand, and because we've got such a broad range of tools available, that also feeds into what actually do they need to get to do their role. Not everyone needs to use everything in Microsoft 365.
Yeah.
You'd never get any work done if you were trying to do that. But the idea is to try and get the organisation to understand really what their users need to be as productive as possible.
Yeah. And I guess there's something there as well, isn't there? And the sort of questions out to both of you about the types of audio and video equipment that people have available to them. I mean, I think we're probably recording. I'm using an external microphone, but I'm using the camera on my Surface with a virtual background to hide. Actually, my office isn't that cluttered, but it just felt like the right thing to do. You're at home, Abby. We can see your spare room, but you're just using the Surface built-in audio and camera.
My little mouse.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's smart. Yeah. And what about you, Alfonso? Are you using built-in products or?
Yeah, I'm using my laptop 3 camera, video, and to be honest, it makes a difference. And for example, my wife has a different device. I'm not going to mention the brand. And
I have one of those too.
And she started having online classes. She took a course, and for me, first time they are using Team, the university, which is great. And it was like, oh, wow, this is really bad. The camera was blurry, the audio was not working, and it was like, oh, it makes a difference now that everyone is moving online. Before maybe, sometimes if you do it only once every 2 weeks, it doesn't matter. But now when you're doing it every day, almost full day, it is important. Yeah,
it does make a big difference. Yeah. Okay. So moving on from Surface, and we've, if anybody's still listening, they've probably heard enough about hardware now. I mean, some people like the toys, but Abby, you mentioned a few moments ago about Microsoft 365 and how this all sort of comes together with, you got the people, the process, the technology, but even the technology there's the hardware side, there's the services that go with software and services that go with that. So, I know from my experience that we can use Microsoft 365 from a manageability and a deployment perspective, not just from what was Office 365 side of things, but also how we bring it together with things like Windows Autopilot to help to deliver laptops. I said laptops, but a device, and it doesn't have to be a Surface device, a device straight from distribution to employees without corporate involvement.
Yeah.
And that was obviously read from my notes, but Alfonso, where are we seeing this being particularly useful to clients? I'm guessing at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, there was a lot of, there were problems getting hold of PCs. The channel had been hit by China's problems before we had this in Europe, but we can move away from this world where we need an IT department to build every laptop, can't we?
It's modernization of IT in that sense, right? It's how you avoid that part of the imaging and all that kind of workload, and they can use that time to do other strategic analysis internally in the organization, and that's kind of how we are looking at it. And if you think about the scenario that we are now, that people actually was forced to work from home and they cannot go to they couldn't go to the office to pick up a device. So in this kind of solution, actually, we saw some examples from schools that they had to send the devices to the teacher. And what they did was, they enroll the device in Autopilot. And when there is a process of operational process to do it. Very simple. The imaging, the configuration of the devices in Intune, that is the technology that we have. And then, of course, ship the devices directly from the distributor to each person, each teacher, at their own house.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is, I know, previously I have my device. Even if you're a new employee, you have to go and leave the device in IT for, I don't know, one day and then come back. It's going to be ready. So I think it's kind of a game changer in that sense, because you can do it one time and for multiple devices, depending, of course, if they are on the same team, etc. So I would say it's really a way to avoid time, reduce cost, and sometimes when we explain about the technology benefits, it's difficult to make it really tangible. I think in this case, I think it's easier to see it, because actually if you spend some time physically, the IT people do it, configuration, etc., with the USB stick before as well. And now it's just everything in the cloud. Do it once, put the device there, open your laptop, couple of minutes, connect it to Wi-Fi, and that's it. You're ready to go.
Yeah, and I know we've done this with clients even pre-COVID. You know, working with Autopilot, so you can receive a device, log on with your the UPN format of your username, which, you know, to many people is their email address, and, you know, away you go. It recognizes that you need to be in a particular organization. Those organizations' policies are applied. If you're using tools like OneDrive, then, you know, your data is going to follow you, your personal files and folders. And it's a really, or it can be, you know, a really simple, streamlined process. And it's a world away from my past life, and I'm probably showing my age here, but, you know, creating ghost images of PC builds, you know, and yeah, I am showing my age. Neither of you two remember that. It's just faces tell me everything. But you know, it's something that many IT organisations, you know, are sort of starting to move towards. But, you know, it really is a huge benefit in this world where we can't rely on people going into the office to pick up equipment. You know, so no, that's. Yeah, let's move the conversation on, because the next logical step for us to talk, you know, we talked about Surface and devices. We've talked a little bit about Microsoft 365 and about how we can use tools like Autopilot to deploy to a device. But I've heard about this thing called Workplace as a Service, and it sounds interesting. You know, if I put a business head on, I forget that I'm a geek for a minute. You know, I'm just thinking about different ways of financing new devices. You know, particularly when people say, "Oh, but I can get a, you know, no-name PC for price X, and a Surface costs me this." You know, how can they look at the problem a little bit differently and potentially solve that issue?
Yeah, so I'll start that. So we're currently actually doing it with a client at the minute around the whole managed device and the whole managed experience, really, and doing a benchmarking analysis against that as well, against a normal device versus a Surface device, and then also whether it be on MMD or non-MMD.
So that's the Microsoft Managed Desktop, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's. This client is looking at whether it's a more viable option to move to a more subscription based, rather than that massive budget you've got to go and get for 2,000 devices. And then also, obviously, the hidden costs of setting all of that up and managing all of those devices. There is obviously the next step up is to have a fully managed estate. So the IT team literally has to have minimal interaction with it, and it's all managed, it's supported by Microsoft as well. Obviously the devices are, so it's all under, it's like as if you go and buy a new car and you have it on a term period and you pay monthly, and everything's looked after.
So no more big capex budgets to go and find. Is basically you're moving the hardware into an OPEX budget, and as your business grows, or well, hopefully grows, but possibly contracts, then you can react to that. Right. Yeah. Okay.
And you can move more with the time. So rather than burning out devices for 5 years and people getting fed up with how slow their devices or keeps breaking and you keep having to repair, the cost of repairing gets more expensive. You go through a cycle of replacement every 3 years, if I'm right. Because their MMD has to be, I think, a 3-year minimum, like less than 3-year-old device. So you're actually always going to be keeping up with the technology rather than burning out old tech.
So I guess it's analogous to walking into, let's avoid brands here, but walking into a high street store and saying, I'd like a mobile phone, and I don't want to spend £1,000 on a really expensive device, but I'll spend £30 a month and get it bundled with my airtime. It's that kind of thing, but for PCs, is it?
Yeah. And if you think about it, the way that the rest of the stuff's going, so obviously if you're using Microsoft 365, that's a monthly. If you're starting to move to Azure, that's a monthly. It's a lot easier for the finance departments of those organizations to then have forward view of how much it's costing, rather than these big project budgets that you're having to go and get each 3-4 years to do things. You just got that consistent monthly cost. And if some organizations where they're split out into different sort of sub organizations, the chargeback and all those sort of things is a lot easier, to be able to see which departments, like the overall cost for each department.
Yeah, and also if we think about the pace of change that technology have, it's crazy, right? If you have the same device in 5 years, you will have some stuff that are obsolete, of course. And it's not only that the hardware maybe will have different features, but also the software. Windows 10, for example, Windows Hello is a good example, right? If your device is not ready for Windows Hello, you cannot use it. If you purchased thousands of devices 2 years ago, and suddenly you have a new feature from Windows 10, and you will not be able to use it in terms of, for example, such important as security, what you will do? You sell the 2,000 devices and then buy it again. And in that sense, the as a service piece and the subscription, right, that is that you can bring devices, software, and the different services together, is really a good solution. And you can have like 3 years. There are some other options if you're not using MMD, even for 1 year, 2 years, 24 months. And at the end of the day, as you put the example, Mark, of the cell phones, if you know that there is a new cell phone that actually can give you more capability or more productivity, actually you have the option to maybe upgrade and pay more for that one. And I think that's the concept that we are trying to bring here with this modern workplace as a service. It's the same about the software. So it's really about, when we are going back to the different persona in the organization, if you think that now there is a better technology for that persona, that team, and it's at the end of the day, even the financial is better to do it, you should be investing in that. Why waiting, I don't know, a couple of years to do it? And I would say this model of the as a service that we're listening more and more is trying to solve that challenge.
Yeah, I can see the logic there as well. And I know when we were chatting before the call, before the recording, Alfonso, you mentioned that if clients already have Microsoft 365 or Dynamics 365 or Azure, they might be eligible for some Surface discounts. Did I get that right?
Yeah, there is we have some. So we're trying to really push from our side, from Microsoft Surface, to really integrate the story, right? Software and hardware, and especially for us because it's the full Microsoft ecosystem, and part of the promotion or incentive that we're giving to customers and partners is this, we call it Surface Plus offer, that if customers have already, there is specific requirements. So yeah, definitely talk with Risual if you want to know more. But if you have Dynamics or Azure or M365, depending on the SKU, you can get some additional discounts on Surface. And we are seeing this used more and more from customers that are realizing of the value of going that route.
That sounds interesting. And it's probably worth mentioning as well that, and Alfonso alluded to it there, obviously Risual's got services which fit around the core Microsoft services. So, we can add our own managed services wrapper or layer, or however you want to look at things to customize things to meet organizational needs.
And before you even look at the devices, obviously we can help with the analysis and sort of working out what devices fit the users and the organization as well.
And that's why you're the principal BA. Okay, well, it's been really great chatting with you guys this afternoon. Sorry, non-gender specific, with yourself, Abby, and with Alfonso. And I must go and redo my diversity training now. So final question, before I dig myself a really big hole. What's the key takeaways from this discussion that you'd like to leave our listeners with? And I'll go to Abby first.
Okay. I think my key takeaway, and probably what I'd reiterate, is making sure that going forwards you're not burnt again, and you're thinking of the user needs for devices and technology rather than just what's cheap and what works at the time. It's more, it's a bigger thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of, I worked for an organisation that, you know, bought a bunch of laptops with modems in, but they didn't have webcams. And this was at a time when we were starting to use broadband internet more and have more video conferences, and it just didn't meet the user needs. So yeah, okay. Yeah, what about yourself, Alfonso? Anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think similar with Avi. I believe now we're going in a different type of workplace, as we just discovered, right? It's going to be about hybrid, people in the office, people at home, and then it gets really important understanding, as Avi say, the user needs and that person analysis, understanding what are the different teams, what are each of us is doing. It's really, really important. So I would say that's kind of key takeaway for me, is really look at that person analysis in the organization, what they require, not only pre-COVID. Now I think organization will have to re-evaluate the organization and each different team and how they will use the technology to take the most of them, or they can be as much productive as possible.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, thank you both. Thank you for your time this afternoon and your insight. I hope it's been useful to our listeners. I'd like to thank our listeners for listening or watching, depending on the platform that you're catching this on. I'm going to just leave a couple of plugs at the end here. If you want to know more about Risual and how we might be able to help you with your business needs, then feel free to drop us an email, inquiries@risual.com. You can also find more information like this, more podcasts and other content on YouTube, SoundCloud, and other podcast platforms. So just search for Risual, and of course you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook too. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a great day, whatever time you're listening to this.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Have a nice day.
Cheers.